When the two furthest visible planets meet, it indicates a new era of reality. However, there's been a lot of spin on what this great conjunction will entail. So if you're excited to dive into what exactly and what characteristically the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction means throughout history and as it pertains to right now, make sure that you like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so that you are always up to date with what the stars have in store for you. Hi, I'm Maren. I am a professional astrologer, author, and philosophy student. I combine traditional Hellenistic astrological techniques and modern psychological counseling dynamics in order to provide grounded spiritual guidance. And I also have an ongoing interest greater than even in that in mundane world astrology, and so I'm excited to start providing more content around that and start off with that with the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. If you have not already seen your January 2021 forecast or your 2021 forecast, those are either already out or coming soon and will be linked down below, so make sure that you are staying updated with what's happening for your sign as this pertains to it. This will also be in your December 2020 forecast. If you have not seen that for your rising sign, this will explicitly be in that. This video is also brought to you by my very own Astrology Academy course. This course is a comprehensive deep dive into the foundations of Western astrology. This includes history, philosophy, technical concepts, counseling considerations, and a step-by-step guide to reading a chart. So as we enter into this new reality and as the ideas and spread of important information becomes ever more dire and pertinent, if this feels like the time to enhance your ability to understand those ideas and the cycles at play, make sure that you look at the Astrology Academy down below, along with my other courses like the Manifestation Mysteries of the Moon course, all about the moon and how we can work with the moon. I have free webinars down below as well if you want to take an hour and learn with me that way. So first, let's go ahead and define Jupiter and Saturn as planets. Jupiter is expansion, growth, abundance. It's the big daddy of the cosmos. And growth is the fundamental process of life itself. However, growth that's unchecked can be cancerous. So that's where the complementary planet of Saturn can come in, because Saturn is boundaries, limits, contractions. It's the furthest visible planet in space, and so it defines by nature. It places things in categories, boxes, it limits. And it represents the cycles of endings, dyings, things coming to a close. Saturn says no to life, and the planet itself is this rigid, boundaried, raining diamonds energy, whereas Jupiter is the giant gas giant. This is happening in 2020 in Aquarius. Aquarius is a Saturn-ruled fixed air sign. In Capricorn, which is Saturn's other sign, Saturn is about top-down boundaries of limiting down. However, in Aquarius, Saturn's other sign, it's about Saturn's boundaries of bottom up, where we're building upon foundations. Aquarius is young, it's active, and it's still Saturnian, so it's serious in nature. It's not rebellious, it's not, anarchist. That is a misattribution of Uranus when Uranus does not rule Aquarius. Aquarius is much more fixed and steady and serious than I think a lot of people give it credit for. And since it's a fixed sign, it is holding down the essence of the season that it's in, the essence of winter in this case. It's the architect of distilling ideas into formidable structure. And Jupiter and Saturn are in a conjunction. They will be in a conjunction, which is a blending of those two energies. Conjunctions as a configuration, or it's not technically a configuration, but as an alignment, they're neither good nor bad. It depends on the planets involved. Jupiter plus Saturn equals a very neutral blending. It's neutral in the sense that Jupiter tends to be additive, and Saturn tends to be negative, or one is taking, one is giving. So additive and negative, they're neutral together. So in the conjunction, it's definitive of a new epoch, a new reality. It's neither, upward rainbows and butterflies or downward descent in death. The blending of these two energies on its own is very objective, very neutral. We should be very careful of the tendency to either hype up or fear-monger around transits. They can be very, very neutral in terms of just a horizontal development. And yeah, it's less clickbaity to say this. I see some people turning this into like the Age of Aquarius bullshit idea that doesn't mean fucking anything, because anyone can define that any way they want to, and we're not in it. Anyway. it's much more objective than I see a lot of the spin being. It's powerful, but the pairing alone will not have any emotional spin. These two planets bring together life and death to indicate something beyond the emotional day-to-day preference. In the Saturn-ruled sign of Aquarius, though, Saturn does have the upper hand. Planets are most comfortable in their own signs, so Saturn holds dignity, whereas Jupiter doesn't in Aquarius. So there is slightly more seriousness or negation to this transit. It's definitely not destructive or anything like the Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto earlier this year that indicates actual cataclysm, but it's very neutral and very serious. What does slightly alarm me is its proximity to Pluto. It is not in a sign-based co-presence or in the same sign as Pluto, but it is within 8 degrees, from about 23 degrees of Capricorn to 0 to 1 degrees of Aquarius. It's within 8 degrees. And Pluto is representative of manipulation, underworld themes, psychological turmoil, uprisings. And we had more Plutonian themes earlier this year with the Saturn-Pluto alignment, but this is still nearby enough for me to see this as an archetypal energy at play. So first off, this is an archetypal structural new reality of an age of intellectual air signs. However, it does lean more heavily towards the serious than the free-for-all. And it still holds themes of Plutonian surveillance, totalitarianism, manipulation, etc. I predict more surveillance coming down upon us, and also more internet regulations which end up supporting us. There are disadvantages to entering an age of more air than Earth, because we're moving from a cycle of Earth, as I'll explain, into a cycle of air. But I do think that the standard of living will become more intelligent, more intellectual, and more stimulating. That comes with other challenges, though, that come with not having the Earth focus. Because Aquarius might just remove the dictators in power and replace them with new, shinier dictators, so to speak. This is not an anarchist free-for-all. This is a new structure. And Saturn-Jupiter conjunct in early Aquarius will be square to Uranus in Taurus. This, I guarantee, will be a shock to the financial system. I think that there will be just so many changes to the way in which we deal with finances. And it'll be a challenge to the literal Earth beneath us. Uranus and Taurus, fixed Earth, with workplaces and office dynamics and property no longer being used in the same way. And obviously a challenge of environmentalism like never before, where the innovation of the air sign focus is forcing us to get a handle on how we change the way we interact with Earth. These planets, Saturn and Jupiter, were meeting in Earth signs for 200 years because their conjunction meets every 20 years, and for 200 years the meetings happen in the same element. There was an emphasis on industry, economics, and tangibly making use of Earth's resources. Imperialism and stakes on like property were literally what defined history. So the fact that this is now moving from the 200 age of Earth into the 200-year age of air is called the Great Mutation. Every time they meet, it's the Great Conjunction. So when they change elements, it's the Great Mutation. It's more intellectual and flexible. It's not necessarily better elements or neutral, but we can see it as a movement out of the focus on the physical realm and more on the intellectual, the ideological, the creative. And since Jupiter and Saturn meet every 20 years, they will be meeting for the next 200 years in air signs until 2159, when they jump into a disruption of Scorpio, then back to air until 2199, when they actually move into water signs. Because there's always a preview of the next element, and then you go back to the element, and then you actually move into the next one, as we'll describe. So if you already know what house in your chart Aquarius is, and therefore where this new reality could be happening for you, let me know in a comment down below. Now let's get into what I've been working on and what I've been compiling for a while now, which is the historical backdrop. And this has been an alignment that's interested me because the parallels are kind of shocking, just in multiple different ways. So I have highlighted just a small portion of what I think is really representative and can add value, because I've looked at this in different elements and whatnot as well. But in 1980, there was a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in Libra that disrupted the Earth sign cycle. So they were meeting in Earth signs for 200 years. The preview alignment was Saturn and Jupiter in Libra in the 80s. It then went back to Earth until this year, when it'll meet again in air. So this preview alignment of Jupiter-Saturn in Libra in the 80s That was the AIDS epidemic. This was the beginnings of the internet. This was also the beginning of exploitative capitalism like never before. There was a recession that was a preview of what I predict will happen in terms of needing to change the financial system really drastically. And politically, there were literally like boundaries, Jupiter-Saturn broken down and opened up for more unity, like the Berlin Wall was broken down. However, when they returned to Earth signs in 2000, quickly terrorism and government control rose up, more Earth boundaries, and there was a reversion to more restrictions on freedom. And so I definitely see a trend back to towards and forwards actually towards more socialism and more of a widespread condemnation of capitalist manipulation and shadow side. So I think that this was a bit precipitated by the preview of things in the 80s, because 800 years ago was when Jupiter and Saturn were meeting in air signs, and that's the last time when the cycle was in air, as it will be again coming soon. And 1226 is the year when they firmly entered air. So 1226 is when I'm now looking back to see some stark parallels. And Genghis Khan actually rose to power in the 1230s and conquered a lot of China and Asian overall trade routes. I see similar monopolies of strengthening world powers around trade, and in this case globalism. I 100% see a rise in China. I think that the fact that this alignment, funny enough, was like new China superpower of that area at the time, 100% I see this happening in the years to come, and this actually is a pretty prominent conjunction in China's chart. So that's one thing. I think it's happening very close to their moon, I believe. Maybe I'll do a whole video on China if you guys want. I could do a look. I've been looking, like China's chart is really suspicious to me because it doesn't have the typical things I would assume a totalitarian, like communist government to have. So if you want a video on China, let me know. And in 1300s, so right after this conjunction happens, kind of following the turn of the mutation, the Renaissance began to build up in Italy, and this was first indicated by the preview conjunction in Libra, and then a few decades prior with the firm conjunction in Aquarius. Like it was previewed and then it firmly began. And to parallel that to today, I see the tech that we saw beginning in the 80s supercharging, like new reality tech. I think we've been having child's play with tech compared to what's going to come. They met again, the Great Conjunction met again in Aquarius in 1405, and that itself was not a huge year, but it began a trend towards a lot of massive change because Constantine was the final emperor of the Roman Empire, and in 1450s that empire was then conquered and stolen by the Turks. The Renaissance also firmly began to flourish across Eurasia. So there was a firm breakdown of like old structure, but just a new one sweeping in. I also want to talk about how in 709, Jupiter and Saturn were conjunct in Cancer, so a water sign, but they were very close to Pluto, even closer than today, which I think is notable because this period in the 700s was an insane amount of overthrowing of political regimes. I mean, like everything across the board was falling. Across Europe and the Middle East, like every caliphate overthrown. The Kyoto period began later that century in Japan, and just every regime was replaced with another. It really was like Pluto was like goodbye this dictator, hello this dictator. So I think similarly, even though it's not as archaic as what that was happening, I think similarly today there will be a tyranny of the material replaced by a tyranny of the intellectual. They then met again in the late 400s CE in Aquarius. So now we're looking at 400 CE. In 476, Romulus was the last of the Roman emperors in the West. He was overthrown by the Germanic leader who became the first barbarian to rule in Rome. So the order that Rome once brought to the Western Europe, like for 1,000 years, was no more. There was then more archaic barbarian, literal barbarian rulership. So my final thoughts on this, as I said, expect the old tyranny of the material to be replaced by a more current tyranny of the intellectual. I actually say that with no prescription for better or for worse, because maybe I'm someone who's just more sympathetic to more regulation, but I don't think that I think that sometimes more freedom can mean more structure, and so I don't see everything coming into place that might be a limitation to be negative. I'm just very Saturnian and very like meritocratic with my beliefs. But again, in and of itself, this is neutral, and this is a new standard of reality of air signs. It's not the fucking Age of Aquarius bullshit meaningless idea that's defined differently by every goddamn astrologer who uses that term. This is a clear expectations towards more intelligent world issues. By more intelligent, I simply mean more of the arguments of ideas, arguments of ideologies, not arguments of like, boom, you're on my territory. Like, we no longer live in that realm. And I see it as less dense bullshit, but more up in the air bullshit. And I'm actually going to tie this back into some of the election things I said. Like, I'm going to say it because fuck it. I'm here to predict and be an astrologer. I think Biden is going to die in office during this time. I think Kamala, as then the president, as the first woman and woman of color in office, will be a defining representation of this new epoch, knowing that she's on the left and knowing that even though she's nothing, I mean, like, left-leaning centrist, I mean, I'm not gonna pipe her up to being like Bernie level left or anything, but I think that with other things I've seen makes a lot of sense, and with this coming, I think will be a defining moment in this new age, so mark my words. If you enjoyed this and you would like to check out my webinars and learn with me down below, or my courses and commit to learning with me down below, check all that out. And also, if you are a spiritual healer, an astrologer, a tarot reader, etc., and you want to post your services online during this time, my platform Rashi is a network of like Yelp posting, reviewing spiritual practitioners and services, so check that out. Otherwise, make sure that you like, subscribe, and comment down below any thoughts you have about this upcoming energy of the Great Conjunction, any thoughts that you have, any expectations, because I'm looking forward to it, because I like to see these things play out. Life's a game, and it gets excited when it's a new level, but I get the preoccupation and the excitement, and yeah, I get it. So let me know down below. Sending all the love, all the trust, and I will see you in the next one.